Toto Wolff just revealed something that could decide the entire season, before the first race even begins. We are days away from the Australian Grand Prix, the first race of the year. And behind closed doors, Mercedes has changed something inside the engine that most fans have completely missed. Not a new wing. Not a visible upgrade. Something deeper. Something that directly affects power delivery, race starts, and overtaking performance. And here's why this is critical. Last season, more than 70% of position changes in the top 10 were decided either at the start or during the first lap. Not in the pit stops. Not in strategy. At the launch. Now imagine this. George Russell admitted their test starts were the worst of his career. Worse than anything he had experienced before. And just days later, Toto Wolff confirms major engine mapping revisions for Australia. Coincidence? Or emergency response? Because if Mercedes has fixed their torque delivery and energy deployment system, this doesn't just improve their launch. It transforms their entire race execution. Track position. Tire life. Undercut protection. Everything. But here's the part nobody is talking about. Red Bull's straight-line deployment looked dominant in Bahrain. Ferrari's long-run pace looked stable. And Mercedes? Mercedes went silent. No dramatic announcements. No flashy upgrades. Just quiet recalibration. And in Formula 1, when a top team goes quiet before race 1, it usually means something serious is coming. So the real question is not whether Mercedes improved. The real question is how much. And whether Australia will expose a title contender or confirm a crisis. Stay with me. Because what was really changed inside that power unit could decide who leads into turn 1, and who spends the entire season chasing. Mercedes is not bringing a revolution to Australia. And that is exactly why this is dangerous. Because what they are doing is far more calculated. The W17 you will see in Melbourne is visually the same radical machine that appeared in the second Bahrain test. Redesigned side pods. A much tighter engine cover. A heavily revised floor around the rear wheels. A diffuser geometry adjusted to clean up airflow. That transformation already happened. Australia is not about shock value. It is about precision. But here's where things get serious. Between Bahrain and Melbourne, Mercedes has focused on something you cannot photograph. Engine maps. Energy blending. Torque curves. The invisible details that decide whether a car explodes off the line, or hesitates for half a second. And in modern Formula 1, half a second at the start is everything. Because under these new regulations, cars are smaller. More reactive. More dependent on controlled energy release. The internal combustion engine and the electrical deployment system must work like a synchronized heartbeat. If they do not, traction disappears instantly. That is exactly what Russell hinted at. He did not blame the chassis. He did not blame the aerodynamics. He pointed directly at the launch behavior. And when a driver openly admits the starts were the worst of his career, that is not frustration. That is a red flag. So what did Mercedes change? They refined the initial torque delivery window. They adjusted how the electrical energy feeds into the rear axle during the first meters. They recalibrated traction management under maximum load. Not to increase peak power, but to control how that power arrives. Because raw power means nothing if it cannot be deployed cleanly. And here is the strategic layer most people are missing. A better launch does not just gain positions. It protects strategy. If you hold position into turn 1, you control your tire temperature. You avoid dirty air. You dictate pit stop timing. One clean getaway can shape an entire race weekend. But there is another variable. Energy deployment down the straights. In Bahrain, GPS data suggested Red Bull had superior electrical release at the end of long straights. Not massive, but enough. Enough to defend. Enough to attack. Enough to intimidate. Mercedes cannot afford that gap. So while the hardware remains the same, the software intelligence behind it has evolved. And that evolution may only become visible when the lights go out. But here is the tension. Optimization carries risk. Push torque too aggressively and reliability questions appear. Be too conservative and Ferrari slips ahead. And remember, Mercedes already had a minor power unit concern during testing. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to reduce ideal mileage. Which means Australia is not just about speed. It is about validation. The team believes the W17 is a strong base. Stronger than anything they built in the early ground effect era. That confidence matters. But belief is not proof. Melbourne will be proof. Because if the revised engine mapping solves the launch weakness and improves straight-line deployment, Mercedes suddenly becomes a front-row threat. If it does not, then the winter optimism collapses in a single weekend. And that is why this block matters. Because what looks like a minor calibration update on paper could quietly decide whether Mercedes fights for wins immediately, or spends another season chasing shadows. But the engine story is only one layer. Because Australia is not Bahrain, and that difference could expose the true performance hierarchy. Albert Park is deceptive. It looks smooth on television. It looks flowing. But underneath, it is brutal on traction and stability. Heavy braking zones. Short acceleration bursts. Fast direction changes where aerodynamic balance must remain predictable. And this is where Mercedes faces its next examination. The W17 introduced a radical aerodynamic concept in testing. The side pods were reshaped to aggressively manage airflow toward the rear. The engine cover was tightened to improve rear stability. The floor was redesigned around the rear tire wake. All of that looked promising in controlled conditions. But Melbourne is less forgiving. Street circuits punish instability. They exaggerate weaknesses. If the rear end moves unpredictably over curbs, confidence disappears. If the floor stalls in traffic, lap time evaporates. And here's where things get even more interesting. Mercedes is not bringing a visible aerodynamic revolution for Australia. No dramatic new wings. No completely redesigned rear suspension. Instead, they are refining micro-aerodynamic details around the floor edges and cooling exits. Small changes. Millimeter adjustments. Airflow conditioning rather than airflow reinvention. Why does that matter? Because micro-adjustments suggest the base concept is trusted. They are not correcting a failure. They are polishing a foundation. And that is psychologically powerful. For 2 seasons, Mercedes chased solutions. Now, they are developing stability. But stability alone does not win in Melbourne. Track temperature will play a huge role. Unlike the desert heat of Bahrain, Australia can fluctuate dramatically across sessions. Cool mornings. Warmer race conditions. Changing wind direction near the lake. That variability stresses cooling systems and energy management. Which brings us back to the engine. Cooling refinements are not just about preventing overheating. They influence how aggressively you can deploy power. If thermal margins improve, engineers can unlock more consistent electrical release. If margins are tight, deployment must be conservative. And conservative does not beat Red Bull. So Australia becomes a balancing act. Push the optimized engine maps. Protect reliability. Control temperatures. And solve the launch issue. All at once. But there is another pressure point. Ferrari. In Bahrain, Ferrari's long-run pace looked composed. Not explosive. But controlled. Their energy usage appeared efficient. Their tire degradation curves were stable. That consistency over race distance could be lethal on a circuit where overtaking is limited. If Mercedes qualifies well but struggles with race rhythm, Ferrari capitalizes. If Mercedes solves its launch but overheats in traffic, Ferrari waits. This is no longer about raw speed. It is about execution under pressure. And here is the hidden layer most casual viewers overlook. Confidence changes driving style. If Russell trusts the rear on throttle exit, he attacks apexes differently. If he believes the energy deployment is predictable, he defends more aggressively. If he doubts either one, he hesitates. In modern Formula 1, hesitation costs tenths. Tenths cost positions. Positions cost championships. So when Toto Wolff speaks calmly about consolidation, about refinement, about learning from data, understand what that really means. It means they found something in Bahrain. Something incomplete. Something fixable. Australia is the test of whether they fixed it. And when the lights go out in Melbourne, the real story will not be written in the first sector alone. It will unfold over the opening laps. In how the Mercedes behaves in dirty air. In how it deploys energy when attacking. In whether it protects its tires when leading. Because if the W17 remains stable under pressure, if the revised power delivery integrates perfectly with the aerodynamic platform, then Mercedes is not just competitive. They are ready to fight immediately. But if even one piece fails to synchronize, then Australia becomes the first warning sign of a season that might slip away faster than anyone expected. And we are only at race 1. Now here is where the pressure truly intensifies. Because Australia is not just another race. It is the first real comparison. No more simulations. No more controlled testing programs. No more hidden fuel loads. In Melbourne, everyone runs for position. And when that happens, illusions disappear. Mercedes left Bahrain with something unusual. Not panic. Not celebration. But tension. A quiet awareness that the car is good, yet not fully unleashed. And Toto Wolff knows the optics matter. All winter long, there were whispers that Mercedes had found something special. That the new philosophy was bold. That the engine concept could be ahead of the curve. Then Bahrain happened. Red Bull looked sharp. Ferrari looked composed. And Mercedes looked competitive, but not dominant. That gap between expectation and reality creates psychological weight. And psychological weight affects decision-making. So what does a team do in that situation? They refine. They analyze every data trace, every throttle application, every micro-correction in steering angle. Because buried inside those traces is the truth. Was the weakness mechanical, electrical, aerodynamic balance under load, or simply software calibration? From what has been revealed, the answer points heavily toward energy management synchronization. And this is critical. Modern Formula One cars are no longer just mechanical machines. They are rolling software ecosystems. The way the internal combustion engine hands over torque to the electrical system must feel seamless, invisible. If there is even a fraction of delay, traction breaks. If deployment spikes too aggressively mid-corner exit, tire temperature rises. And over a race distance, that compounds. So Mercedes focused on harmony. Not more power, better harmony. But here is the strategic danger. When you recalibrate harmony, you sometimes lose edge. If torque delivery becomes smoother, it may become slightly less aggressive. If electrical deployment is optimized for reliability, peak bursts might reduce. So the question becomes unavoidable. Did Mercedes fix the launch weakness without sacrificing straight-line defense? Because if Red Bull still holds an advantage at the end of long straights, Australia becomes a defensive battle. And defending at Albert Park is not easy. Dirty air is less punishing than before, yes. But turbulence still exists. Pressure still builds. One compromised exit and you are vulnerable into the next braking zone. And let us not ignore reliability. During testing, there was a power unit concern that cost valuable mileage. Nothing catastrophic, but not ideal. When mileage is reduced, validation becomes incomplete. And incomplete validation increases uncertainty. Australia is not just about performance. It is about trust. Can the drivers push without doubt? Can engineers run aggressive maps without fearing temperature spikes? Can the system endure sustained pressure in race trim? These are not dramatic questions. They are decisive ones. Because championships are rarely lost due to obvious failures. They are lost through small compromises repeated over time. Now imagine this scenario. Russell nails the start, holds position into turn 1, stays within DRS range of Red Bull, deploys energy cleanly down the back straight. No overheating, no hesitation. Suddenly, perception shifts. Mercedes is not rebuilding. Mercedes is fighting. But imagine the opposite. A slow launch. 2 positions lost instantly. Stuck in traffic. Rear tires overheating. Energy deployment forced into defensive mode. Then the entire narrative changes. And that is why Toto Wolff's revelation matters more than it sounds. He did not promise dominance. He did not announce a revolutionary hardware upgrade. He revealed targeted engine refinements. Which tells you something very specific. Mercedes believes the foundation is strong. They are not chasing miracles. They are correcting precision errors. And in Formula One, precision wins margins. Margins win races. But whether those margins are enough against Red Bull and Ferrari, that answer waits in Melbourne. And when the lights go out, the first 10 seconds will not just begin a race. They will begin the truth.